Welcome to the offseason here in the Houston Oilers franchise. The Kansas City Chiefs cap off season number 3 in this series as Super Bowl champions, their second straight Super Bowl. Unfortunately, they faced the Eagles, who were missing Jalen Hurts in that Super Bowl, so they had to trot out a quarterback who did not have much experience at all. It ends with Patrick Mahomes getting his 4th ring of his career. The complexity of this series and what makes this series so fun and challenging is the fact that we will have to go up against Patrick Mahomes every year in order to get to the Super Bowl and within our division. It just adds another challenge to this series already on top of building from the ground up. So we really head into this offseason, and I think the main objective is to add more depth and add some really good pieces, at least one on offense and at least one on defense. I'm talking like star power or potential star power type pieces. But here are the top 50 players in the draft. And to start this episode out, we will go through the NFL draft preview. Let's start at quarterback, where the top rated quarterback in this draft is Keegan Adams out of FAU. The intrigue around Adams is that he is a very tall quarterback with a pretty good arm. But the issue with him is that he's been really a one-year wonder, but his numbers are phenomenal. 35 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and I think there's an enamored kind of aura around him. Like, he is a good leader. But I think there are huge question marks, like he cannot throw the deep ball well at all. He's got deep accuracy, but he does throw it short pretty accurately. Like, he's not going to miss many of those passes. But I think league-wide right now, he's been just kind of soaring up the boards because of those awesome college numbers. The second-rated quarterback is John Bush out of Arizona State. We haven't seen many Arizona State quarterbacks be successful in the NFL, mostly because a lot of them came from that spread system where they throw the ball a whole lot of times a game. John Bush is maybe an outlier. I think he is going to be a really good pro. So whoever gets him is going to be very, very lucky. A very accurate quarterback all around. And he is a second-rated quarterback on the board. Third is the guy that backed up Logan Harrington, who is the backup quarterback for the Chargers right now. And I was going after Logan Harrington a couple of drafts ago. In Donovan Monroe. Monroe is the Heisman Trophy winner, by the way. And he is amazing. His numbers this year were great. He won the Heisman, obviously. I kind of compare him a little bit to Keon Carter, but I think he put up way better college numbers. But he's pretty similar. Like, he's not as super mobile. He's accurate all around the field. Obviously, Carter wasn't as accurate as we wanted, but coming out of college, these were kind of comparable attributes that we saw from Carter. And I think that's kind of a comparable guy coming into this draft. Coming down the board a little bit, I don't want to talk personally about the Oilers. And one guy I'm looking at late is Davion Spikes. Davion Spikes came into the season with high expectations, with a very, I would say, tricky situation with South Carolina. They were started out the season top 10 in the nation, but it soon started to unravel and they started to lose a lot of games, which is why you see him as a day 3 projection right now. But I think he's got a really live arm. He is actually mobile, and he has good size at 6'4". He can throw the ball all around the field, and he can really play in any type of offense, but I think the spread system is kind of what benefits him and his skill set. Coming further down the board, and one of the guys that is rising up the boards right now is Chris Mathis out of Stanford. Mathis is 6'1", but has shown some dual threat ability in college. Now, the intrigue behind him is that he runs a pro-style offense, but the numbers aren't great, but he knows where to go with the football, and he played on a very, very, very untalented team with Stanford this year, but he shows some very good intangibles, has pretty good ratings right here with B deep accuracy, B medium, and A short, and I think this is a guy that could make a roster here late with the draft pick and surprise some guys. So depending on what team he goes to, he could have a chance to be either a really, really good backup or maybe even a potential starter. Running back in this class is kind of underwhelming in my opinion. Other teams see otherwise. Taj Holiday is the top back, but he's only 5'7", and he's more of a receiving back, to be honest with you. C carrying, but his medium route running is pretty intriguing, but I wouldn't see this as kind of your bell cow running back. Like, he is a guy that's going to be a change of pace back, but a lot of teams see differently. They see that even his 5'7" stature could be a do-it-all purpose back. But I think maybe the best running back in this class is Matthew Darby out of Wisconsin. Pretty good attributes if you're looking at this right here. C carrying, which is alarming, but B vision, B break tackle, A juke move, and he has some decent strength as well. A lot of teams are clamoring over Chris Seawright though, and they think he could be the number one, but I don't think so. B break tackle, but only F ball carrier vision. And then he has D trucking, only C carrying. I mean, it's not anything that I would be, you know, slamming the book saying I need to go get this guy. I think it's just okay. But moving over to receiver, which is a position we could potentially be looking at in the draft, we have two elite guys, and the first is Keenan Davis out of Texas A&M. We only have him 50% scouted, but he is a top 5 projection, which does leave you a little interested beyond that 50%. Should we scout him more, or should we scout Trent Ingram a little more? Both of them have really athletic profiles. Like, they are the probably two most athletic receivers in this draft, and are probably day one starters right out of the gate. But how good are they? I think that's the big question. And looking at what we have on our roster right now, Quincy Hall is approaching 80 overall, and he's 22 years old. So what would be the difference between getting one of these guys and sticking with Quincy Hall? That's kind of the question I'm working with. But moving over to tight end, I do think we need to address this position, mainly because I want a playmaker on offense, and I think that tight end could be a position we could upgrade a little bit. The best tight end in this class is Trevor Rivers. He is amazing. He is athletic. He has good size. He can block. He is a do-it-all guy. He's one of those guys that you would probably compare right now to, I would say, George Kittle. The second rated tight end in this draft is Danny Rudd out of Michigan State. Another athletic guy. Like, he is a guy that if you give him the ball, he could take it for 6, because if a linebacker's guarding him, it's a straight mismatch. And one thing about him is that he does do well blocking for the pass, but blocking for the run is definitely his weak suit. So he has B pass blocking, but you can just see, all of his athletic attributes are really high. But then you look at things like run blocking, it's a C to an F. So that definitely does leave some concern there. The third tight end in this draft is also from Alabama, but this guy can flat out fly. It's Chad Harrell. He's pretty one-dimensional. I don't think he's going to be necessarily a blocking tight end. You line him up at receiver, and he can blow past corners. Like, he has that type of speed, and I guess the combine will really show that. But there are some other tight ends who are interesting in this class. Shaquille Jenkins is one that's potentially undrafted, but I still like his attributes. His catching attributes are really good. B catching, A catch in traffic. Not much of a run blocker, but there is a pretty deep tight end class in this year's class. So we move over to defense, and the number 1 overall projected pick is Jameel Harris out of Temple. I don't think there's much question in this draft who's going to be the number 1 pick. Harris is by far the best in this class, and he looks amazing, and we probably have no chance of getting him, even though we would not need him because we obviously have Von Cross, we obviously have Nick Woods. There's no need, but I think I should highlight him as one of those potential, number 1 picks in this series. There are some really good defensive tackles in this draft, and I don't know when we would go after one, but I am interested for sure. But if there are other, BPA, best players available at other positions, I definitely could go that route. But there are a lot of interesting options here at defensive tackle. And I look at Akeem Monty, like he's projected round 3 to 4. He's another one of those guys that we could find a lot of value with towards the end of the draft and possibly in the 3rd and 4th rounds, or maybe even later if he falls. But he is a solid player. I like his attributes right there you just saw on the screen. One of my goals in the offseason is to add some speed at linebacker, and Ladarius McNeil is probably the fastest linebacker in the draft. He is amazing. The only question I have about him is that he does have deep play recognition. I wonder how low that would be. There's also Morris Patton, another linebacker out of the SEC. More speed. And I'm looking at one of these two guys in this draft. Hopefully, we are available to pick one of them in possibly the 3rd or 4th round. We aren't really looking at cornerback, so I don't want to really highlight that too much because we're pretty set at cornerback. But looking at safety, Micah Hyde obviously retired, so we're looking at some free safeties and some strong safeties. And going down the board a little bit, I kind of focus on Bradley Collier because he's not technically the top rated safety, so there's not going to be a team, and it has happened in Madden where teams do reach, but I don't see any team reaching for him. And I say that because he's only 5'10". He doesn't have, amazing size, but he fits what we do well. Like, he doesn't need to be a bone-crushing safety. He just needs to cover well. And I see him as a pretty good asset here in the probably 3rd or 4th round. But I think we don't have to trade up for him. But if we see a run on safeties, it could happen. But the number 1 safety in this draft is Bryce Meeks. And if we want Bryce Meeks, we're going to have to trade up for him. He is amazing. And he is the number 1 safety for a reason. And safeties usually don't go top 10. Meeks has a chance to go top 10. He is one of the smartest safeties I've seen in a draft class with A awareness and A play recognition. He also can tackle well and cover. So here is the mock draft. And I think one thing to highlight is that you see, where these receivers and tight ends are going. These are kind of the ranges where we would have to trade up to get them. We already have Ingram and also Davis projected to go in the top 12, and then Trevor Rivers, the first tight end, off the board at 17. So if we're looking to trade up, we're going to have to trade somewhere in between 10 and probably 20 in order to select one of those 3 guys. Danny Rudd is projected 27 right now to the Rams. And then looking at our pick, we're projected to get Bradley Collier. But I don't project him as a 1st rounder, to be honest with you. Like, if we want him, we could probably get him in the 2nd, maybe even 3rd round. So obviously going into the off seasons, we start with retirements, and Micah Hyde retires, and that was one of the scenarios going into the playoffs. And I think that actually helped us because we started to get more of a morale boost as the offseason went on. As the postseason went on, it was +10, and it helped our attributes out quite a bit. But there are some other surprising retirements across the league. DeAndre Hopkins retires, Kirk Cousins retires, and Khalil Mack retires. Now, DeAndre Hopkins being probably the most surprising because he was looking for a multi-year contract, remember, last offseason. He turned us down, went to Carolina, and I guess they weren't good, so he ended up retiring, which is pretty funny. But then looking at the other major players, Russell Wilson retired, but he lost his job to Bernard McMichael. And I think this is going to be a changing of the guard year. We're going to start to see a lot of elite younger players now ascend and start to win some major awards. So now we go into re-signing. And the re-sign phase is always interesting because sometimes you offer really good contracts and your guys just deny it. But looking at what we have to re-sign, there's not many. Like, we can obviously go after a lot of our guys in free agency if they choose not to resign, like Deion Branson. He rejects the offer and tests free agency, but we're going to definitely go after him in free agency. I don't want to see him go. Trey Battle, he accepts his offer. Chase Brown had a great ending to the season. We signed him to a 1-year extension, and I only signed him to a 1-year extension because I want to evaluate what he and Antonio Gibson look like together and then make a long-term decision after Antonio Gibson and his contract both expire. Mark Schilling ends up hitting free agency. He was our backup left tackle. Ryan Lee Jr. also hits free agency. So a lot of these players are just like rejecting the contract, and it has to do with probably their interest, but we're going to go after them anyway. And I want to bring all of these guys back pretty much. There are a couple of guys I don't want to re-sign, like Kyle Phillips. I just don't think there's a spot for him on the team anymore, so I'm going to let him walk. But then like Owen Hayes Jr. rejects our contract. He's a fullback, so we decide to actually franchise tag him. It's only $3.44 million, so I am okay with doing that. He gets the first franchise tag. So now we head into free agency, where there are a couple of big fish, but I wouldn't say like too many huge fish in this free agency class. We obviously saw at the top there was Ronnie Stanley, Kyle Phillips was there, and some other guys which we will highlight coming up. But here's kind of what we're looking at. You know, there are a lot of guys here that would be good starters, but our team is pretty much built right now around the draft and our young guys who are starters and still developing. I'm not necessarily looking to replace them in free agency, and I'm not looking to hand out any huge contracts. We right now have two big contracts right now, and that's left tackle David Bakhtiari and left guard Joel Bitonio. So we spent all the money last offseason. I probably won't do that this offseason. But if there is one guy we really should break the bank for, it's probably Garrett Wilson. Mainly because we don't have that true number one receiver. And Garrett Wilson has been probably misused throughout this series. You see in 3 straight seasons, he's been under 1,000 yards and has only notched 7 touchdowns maximum. We look at the other receivers available. There's Tyler Lockett. There is other guys that are below him, but nobody on Garrett Wilson's level. Probably the best defensive end available is Sam Hubbard. I really like Sam Hubbard a lot. He is a good Madden player, and I'm very, very interested in signing him. Then there's Kyle Hamilton, one of the best defensive players available. He is at 88 true overall, 90 with morale, still only 25 years old. The one thing that I don't like is that he's only 88 speed. I have had issues with having slower safeties, and I think right now we are going to pass on Kyle Hamilton. But one position I do want to make sure that's shored up is backup quarterback. Malik Willis is available. I talked about it last episode. I want to make sure I solidify a veteran backup who can move a little bit. Like, I do want some mobility, and Malik Willis is there. So we will offer him a 2-year contract worth about $12 million total, and we have the cap space to do it. We obviously have Keon Carter, who is our starter under his rookie deal, so I don't have a problem with signing a veteran backup that makes decent money. I decide to pass on Garrett Wilson, and I will talk about why a little later, and it's probably because, you know, a little bit of a couple of things. We have a lot of receivers on the depth chart. We have some guys I want to still develop. So I want to add a veteran, but somebody that I don't want to break the bank on. We failed at getting DeAndre Hopkins last year, so I decided to offer a pretty smaller contract to Romeo Doubs and see if he will come to the team. I need a basic number 4 or number 5 receiver who can step in when we see injuries. So those are the first 2 contracts we give out, and now I want to look to defensive line. Jermaine Johnson is available, but so far in Madden, he has not been productive. 2 sacks is the most he's had in a season. I don't know if that's contributed to playing time or just his actual production. But I highlighted Sam Hubbard earlier. I really, really like his production. He's been a starter with Cincinnati and Tennessee, respectively, and he had 5.5 sacks the last 2 years. Very, very productive, and we don't necessarily need him to start. So I signed him to a pretty good 1-year deal here, at least offer the contract out. 1 year, $9.4 million, and hopefully he accepts that. I talked about it earlier a little bit, but I want to add speed at the middle linebacker position. And Brian Asamoah is one of those guys. He played for the Vikings throughout his career, very athletic. And looking at what he's done, it's not like these are eye-popping stats, but I want a depth middle linebacker that can back up Devin Bush, and when Devin Bush gets hurt like he did this year, I won't really see a drop-off. During the season, I had to substitute in Nick Woods at middle linebacker, and Dave Washington had to kind of play out of position. I don't want to do that anymore. So I want to sign a athletic middle linebacker Nakobe Dean is also available, but I think Nakobe Dean's man coverage is a little lower than what I would want. Brian Asamoah at least has like 69. It's close to 70, and he has good speed. He's still 26. So I want to offer him a 1-year deal. It doesn't have to be a long-term deal, but I want to at least see him for 1 year before committing to him long-term. So he will be our 4th contract we give out. Finally, we move on to our final contract to give out during this first round. And I think one thing I do want to add, because I'm looking to unload a couple of players for some draft picks in this draft, and I want to add a veteran pass rusher. And this is more of a homer pick a little bit. I watched a lot of Big Ten football and was a big fan of Boye Mafe coming out of college, and he just hasn't got a chance with the Seahawks. And I think I'm going to give him at least a chance to get in on pass rushing downs, and he will be our last offer here. So he will be a depth edge rusher. So here are our 5 guys here: Boye Mafe, Malik Willis, Asamoah, Romeo Doubs, and Sam Hubbard. And we will see if any of them commit. And we do submit the first contract offers, and we do get commitments from Romeo Doubs coming over from the Packers, Brian Asamoah coming over from the Vikings, and then Boye Mafe from the Seattle Seahawks here in that first period here. But Sam Hubbard and Malik Willis are still hanging out here. Malik Willis does have high interest. He still does not commit, but we are the only offer for both of them. And then Sam Hubbard still does not commit. So we do have the eval 3 times during the first round. So now we move on to the second round of free agency, and we do get a good bit of news. Sam Hubbard does commit after stipulating a little bit further, and he is only signed for 1 year. So I want to use this year to keep developing our young defensive ends behind Nick Woods and Von Cross, along with Heath Burnham. And I think Sam Hubbard is just some much needed depth. I mentioned it earlier, but I am going to go ahead and offer contracts to all those guys that did hit free agency, and I want to make sure we re-sign them. But Malik Willis is really the remaining guy that we really want to go after. All the other guys end up re-signing, so they hit free agency just to re-sign with us. But Malik Willis is still hanging out, and after evaluating an offer here in the second stage, the Jets climb up into the deal. And the Jets, remember, have Greg McPherson, who won Rookie of the Year in the AFC as a quarterback. So I want to make sure that they have to be desperate in the draft or something and go after a quarterback, because, like I said, the draft is more of like a competition. You want to play strategic. So we decide to up our offer for Malik Willis. We do get ahead of the Jets as far as offers, and then we go and evaluate, and Malik Willis accepts. So he will be the backup quarterback here for the Oilers, and that means that we're going to have to make some changes at backup here as far as our roster depth goes, and we will address that in a little bit. So here are our final signings. Sam Hubbard agrees to a 1-year deal. Romeo Doubs for 2 years. Brian Asamoah for 1 year. Malik Willis will sign as the backup quarterback for 2 years, and Malik Willis does have a chance to compete for a starter, but he's not going to be the day one starter. It's still going to be Keon Carter more than likely, unless we find somebody in the draft that trumps him. Right now, Keon Carter deserves another shot here in year 2. He led our team to the AFC Championship. So I am happy with what we did in free agency, and I'm excited for the draft. But looking around the league, the Cardinals signed Ronnie Stanley to a 1-year mega deal. Kyle Hamilton goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars on a 5-year deal, and Garrett Wilson goes to Detroit. Now, if you remember, the last 2 seasons, Detroit always signs a free agent wide receiver. Last year, they signed Amari Cooper. Actually, that was in season number 1's offseason. And then we traded them DTR. So DTR now has Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and also Amari Cooper all to throw to. That leaves a straggler receiver in Jameson Williams, who I will not attempt to trade for in this episode, but coming into the season, it definitely is a possibility. Other free agents, Grady Jarrett signs with the Lions. So the Lions are actually building something really special. Christian Watson goes to the Titans. And if you remember in the season recap, we did say that we would release Justin Fields from the Rams, and he goes to the Titans. I thought about here in the offseason going after Justin Fields. I just didn't think it'd be realistic based on us drafting Keon Carter last year. I wouldn't think that it would be realistic to sign a quarterback to replace him right away. And I think that Carter, like I said, showed some good things in the playoffs and does deserve another year of developing as the starter. So now looking at our roster, we have 5 quarterbacks. One is a practice squad guy that's just there for depth. But Deion Branson's going to officially move back to receiver, and he's going to line up in some Wildcat situations. He's also going to play some special teams. It allows me to do that. When he's listed as a quarterback, I can't play him all around the field like I want to. So he actually ends up being a 74 overall receiver, which is pretty good. Well, that basically jams up the receiver room. And last season, we acquired Julian Wiley from the Jaguars for a bunch of picks, and one of those picks was a 3rd round pick. And I look at other teams that may need a receiver, and the Packers are one of them. So we decide to call the Packers GM and negotiate a deal to send Julian Wiley over. He's not worth much than a 3rd, 4th, and we eventually settle for a 5th round pick. So really, we call this a loss because we traded Julian Wiley, and we ended up sending a 3rd round pick for him in that Jaguars deal and then end up getting a 5th back. So I guess we just lose in that deal. But Wiley made some mistakes, had some bad drops, and I'm not sad to see him go. Now, in the offseason, we did see a dev trait regression in a lot of our players. And one of them was Terrell Harvin, who came into this series. Remember, we drafted him back in season 1 as a 4th round pick, a superstar X factor. And in his rookie year, he had 1 sack. In his second year, he had 2 sacks. I mean, it was just not productive at all. And I just can't sit around and wait for him to kind of pop. I need him to have good games. I need him to be productive. And now that he's lost that superstar X factor, he becomes expendable. There are a lot of teams that need defensive tackle. Maybe the most thirsty team is the Seahawks. They have Barry Riddick right now, who has 0 experience. And we are able to get a 3rd rounder out of Terrell Harvin, and they will accept that deal. So we draft him as a 4th rounder, flip him for a 3rd rounder. So I really, really like that deal. I know a lot of you guys wanted to see what Terrell Harvin can do, but he regressed 2 dev traits. So he's no longer of a high value to us. If he was still a superstar X factor, that probably could have been like a 2nd round pick, to be honest with you. So the last guy I do want to give a chance to go to another team is Philip Waters. And the main reason is because Philip Waters was a good quarterback for us when he needed to fill in. 8 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. I think the Eagles could have used him last game when they had a Super Bowl with Casey Knight out there. I think they would have been a lot better with Philip Waters. But I decided to trade him to a situation where he could potentially be a starter, and that's with the Chicago Bears. They still have the same weapons, no longer have Justin Fields, and we decide to negotiate with them. We try to get a 3rd round pick. They weren't interested at all in that. They do have Jordan Love still, and he can compete with Jordan Love. We tried a 4th rounder. They're not going for that. And then finally, a 5th round pick. We trade him and trade that and Philip Waters for a 4th rounder, and they will agree to that. So Philip Waters has a fresh team, has a chance to compete for a starting job. I'm not sure what the schedule is going into next year, but I really hope we play the Bears, and I really hope they have him as the starter because that would be pretty cool. So now after those 3 trades, we officially have a pick in every round. But that doesn't mean we'll necessarily stay in each round. We could be using picks to trade up, picks to trade back. Who knows? But going into draft season, we have to pick our super focused players, the private workout players, and we decide on Bradley Cooper, Danny Rudd, and Davion Spikes. So now let's look at the results of these workouts. Davion Spikes goes up to 90% scouted. Now, he is a day 3 projection, but he looks really good. A, awareness, B, play action, B, accuracies on all 3 levels, B, throw under pressure, and he's got great arm strength. Danny Rudd, pretty good as well. 90% scouting, A, catching traffic, A, medium route, B, short route, A, spectacular catch. He looks good. And then Bradley Collier. I think it's confirmed that he is probably the second best safety in this entire draft class, even at 5'10". B, block shedding, B, awareness, B, man, B, zone. He looks amazing. Like, that's a good rookie safety out of the gates. So we enter the draft with a lot of confidence here. We made some moves in free agency that will help us, but I think we're going to find some good pieces here. With the first pick, Jamil Harris goes to the Patriots, and the Patriots look to rebuild. They need more than just one player, but they draft a pretty good one in Harris. Keegan Adams is the first quarterback off the board at pick number 3. He goes to the San Francisco 49ers, and like I said, a lot of teams were high on him, but I'm not sure. Moving on in the draft, we get to pick number 6, and we definitely are thinking about at this point moving up in the draft. And I look at what the Vikings have at receiver, and they already have 3 good receivers, but would they go Keenan Davis here? That is the big debate. I don't think so, but I look at Keenan Davis and I kind of wish we had more players in private workouts, because 50% scouting doesn't tell the whole story for him. We just don't know. Is he going to be really good, or is he going to be a bust? And I'm not sure if I want to take that risk, but I'm going to try. So we offer a first-round pick this year, which is pick 29, and our first next year to trade up to this spot to select Keenan Davis, and the Vikings declined that offer. I just don't see myself taking more of a risk than that. I feel like that's a lot to give up for a guy we know 50% about. So I decide to leave it there. I don't decide to offer anything more, because I look at our roster and we have Quincy Hall, who is right now 22 years old and 79 true overall. How much better could Keenan Davis be than Quincy Hall? I'm not sure. And because of that thought, I decide not to trade up to this spot. So we sim the Vikings pick, and either way, they go with DeAndre Foster. So they do not go with Keenan Davis. But with the next pick, Bryce Hall gets some help, and Keenan Davis goes to the Carolina Panthers. That's the main reason why I wanted to trade up to that Vikings spot, because I knew the Panthers would be looking for a receiver, and they end up snagging Davis. So Trent Ingram ends up going a couple of picks later. He was the next player I was thinking about, but I liked Davis a little more than Ingram. I thought, just the athletic profile. I liked what Davis brought to the table. So now I think we've moved and switched gears onto the tight ends. And I think that receiver is probably out of the question here in the first round. We only had 2 guys in mind. But Bryce Meeks ends up going pick number 13 to the Giants. So the best safety is off the board. But I don't think we need to rush here for Bradley Collier at any point. But looking forward, now we're at pick 15, defensive tackle. At pick 16, wide receiver to the Texans. Now at pick 17, Trevor Rivers. So really the best overall tight end goes off of the board. And now I start to get a little worried that we might need to trade up here for Danny Rudd. The Cleveland Browns select cornerback George McCallum, but now we are thinking about trading up to possibly select Danny Rudd. The Arizona Cardinals have the next pick, and we try to negotiate with them, sending a first and a third next year for that 19th overall pick. They decline that. We throw in a 7th round pick. They decline that. We then throw in a 6th and a 7th round pick. The 6th would be for next year. The 7th would be for this year. So we trade 4 picks for 1, and they do not accept that. So a lot of hard bargaining, and we decide to let the Arizona Cardinals pick, and they choose a receiver, John Whitehead. So now we get to the Seahawks at pick 20, and I'm still worried about Danny Rudd going off of the board here. So we offer them what they want. They wanted a defensive end, which Derek Copeland can play end, our first round, and a 7th round this year. They declined that offer. But on the phones, they tell us who they really want. They want James Houston the 4th. They need a couple of pieces to get them over the top, and they think that James Houston can get them there. He's been pretty productive with us, but kind of in a reserve backup rotational role, and he's been extremely valuable to us. But what do we need? Do we need a playmaker on offense more, or do we need James Houston? And that question is answered when we agree to this deal. We agree to send James Houston, our 1st this year, our 7th this year, and a 5th this year for a 1st round pick this year and a 6th. So we acquire a pick and we get a pick, and we will be selecting Danny Rudd out of Michigan State. I wanted a really good playmaker, and a couple of drafts ago, we drafted Callum McDermott out of Florida, and he has been good. I just don't think he's a bona fide starter, and I think that Danny Rudd could change our offense and give us maybe even a Travis Kelce type of role in this offense. He ends up being really, really athletic. The athletic profile fits. He's 87 acceleration, 85 speed, and hidden dev at age 21. I'm very happy with that selection. Taj Holiday will be the pick that we traded with the Seahawks. They end up going running back, and surprise, surprise, the Seahawks go running back in the 1st round. So moving on to the 2nd round, I have eyes on a couple of guys, but you already know I am enamored at this point with Bradley Collier. I think he is the 2nd best safety. So a couple of safeties get drafted, and I have to go back and check to see who's ranked ahead of them. Tommy Bolden and Delvin Tiller. So if one of those two guys go off of the board next, we're going to have to start making moves. So Tommy Bolden is selected by the Colts here. Lynn Tillman goes pick number 10 here in the 2nd round to the Broncos. And then the Commanders are here on the clock. I'm not sure if I should take the risk of waiting. So I decide to negotiate with the Commanders just to see if they would budge here. And they are just asking for a lot to move up. We offer a 2nd, 3rd, 6th, actually 2 6th, and they end up declining that offer. So we decide to just let them pick, and they select a quarterback. So I don't know if they thought we were going to select quarterback, but they were standing firm. They select Donovan Monroe out of Baylor. So Dallas is on the clock next, and we offer them a lighter deal than what we offered the Commanders, a 2nd, a 6th, and a 4th, a future 4th. They declined that offer. That was the 1st offer. So then we decide to negotiate a little bit, and they agree to send a 2nd this year and a 3rd next year for a 2nd round pick this year. So we're moving up. A 6th round pick this year, and a 2nd and a 4th next year. So basically, the Cowboys move back in this year's draft and move up in next year's draft, and they give us this pick. And there is no doubt who we are going to select here with pick 12 of the 2nd round. It's Bradley Collier. Collier is my version in this series as far as draft comparisons go to Earl Thomas. He can do it all. He can cover. He can hit. He can tackle with the best of them. He can be a leader. And he's only 5'10", and he's got good speed at 90. I think this is the perfect replacement for Micah Hyde, and I think he's even a better tackler than Micah Hyde was. So I am very happy with our first 2 picks with Danny Rudd out of Michigan State, and now Bradley Collier out of Stanford. So our next pick is at round 3, pick 20. There are a couple of guys I'm looking at, but looking at the players that were picked after, now there's a run on safety. So we made the correct move moving up there, and 3 safeties go in the next 4 picks. So we definitely made the right move trading up. So now we move to the third round, where I'm not sure if we're going to be trading any more in this draft, at least trading up any more in this draft. How about this? The third Alabama tight end goes off the board, Leonard Richardson. So they had an amazing class of tight ends. But now I am looking to potentially trade back, because I got my two guys I wanted, and there are guys I still like on the board, but nobody that I'm like really gung-ho about. The Eagles offer a pretty interesting pick to trade back 12 spots and then get a 4th and a 7th next year. I definitely thought about taking that offer. The Dolphins offer a 4th, 5th, and a 7th as well. But I decide to actually stick at this pick. And Davion Spikes was a day 3 projection, and he is a pretty good fit for what we do. He is 6'4", and the difference between he and Keon Carter is that he can move. But this doesn't have to be a selection for a starter going into next year. We could definitely sit him and just see what we get out of Carter this year, and then if it doesn't work out, Davion Spikes could be the quarterback of the future. So with this pick, we will be selecting Davion Spikes out of South Carolina, a guy that can make all the throws, and maybe his team underachieved a little bit this year in college football, but I really like his intangibles. He has really good speed too, 83 speed, 85 acceleration, which is much more athletic than Keon Carter is, and he also has really good arm strength. I am happy with our 3rd round pick. So on to the 4th round, where we pick at number 4 in the 4th round. And I think one thing that I have not talked about much at all are the impending free agents a year from now. We have 4 big ones: Antonio Gibson, Irv Smith Jr., David Bakhtiari, and Joel Bitonio. Bakhtiari and Bitonio are the highest paid guys on the team, and together they gave up 0 sacks combined. But we do need to be smart here. They are going into their mid-30s, and they could potentially retire at any point. So there is a scenario where guys just retire at whim. I've seen it in Madden, where guys just have, they go out there and they're just like, I'm not feeling it. So I want to be extra sure and make sure we snag an offensive lineman just in case, one of our veteran offensive linemen retires or does not re-sign next year. And I decide to go with right tackle out of Oregon, Maurice Finch. Now, Finch has played both guard and tackle in college. Here he is at guard. He's actually not bad inside. He is more of a run blocker more than anything, but I think he's a guy that really could move inside. And that's probably going to be the plan with him. He is just a much better run blocker in my scouting than a pass blocker. And I don't know how good he's going to be, but he is normal dev, and he's 6'4", 315, big body. He's going to move inside probably with A, lead block, A, impact block, and B, run block. So now our final pick in this draft is in the 6th round, because remember, we traded a bunch of picks to move up, and now we have one more. So really, in the 6th round, you're really just taking a flyer on a guy. There are a couple of guys that fell in the draft. Kyle Hightower is one. He is a pass rusher who we are one of his best fits. And looking at what he's done athletically in the combine, he's pretty decently athletic. He doesn't do anything overly great, and he's not overly bad in anything. But there's a guy I do like here, and it's Devin Bridge, I should say. Devin Bridge has elite strength. Where have we seen this before? Well, Terrell Harvin, when we drafted him, was elite strength, and he had B power moves and also A pursuit. We've seen this story, but maybe it could work out with Devin Bridge. So we will be selecting the big defensive end or defensive tackle out of Iowa. 6'5", 309. He is a massive human being, and he will be the final pick of this draft here for the Oilers. It caps off a pretty good offseason that I am very, very excited about. So now we look at the results from the draft, and we will take a look at the final ratings. Danny Ruz is a true 75 overall hidden dev tight end I am very excited about him, and he's going to get a lot of playing time early, and he's going to have a chance to get on the field quite a bit. He comes in with 85 speed, but he comes in with 89 spectacular catch. So he's going to make the tough catches when you think that they can't be completed. He's going to go up and get it with 79 catch in traffic also. His run blocking is only 56. That definitely worries me. So in run blocking situations, Irv Smith is going to have to be the leader there, but Danny Rudd is going to be in on passing downs for sure. At safety, we get a replacement for Micah Hyde and Bradley Collier in the second round. 5'10", 21 years old, and he looks really good too. 90 speed, 76 zone. He is only normal dev, which kind of sucks, but he's got pretty good ratings across the board. Does that 79 injury concern me a little bit? Probably, but he looks like a overall good safety right out the get-go. In the third round, we select Davion Spikes. He ends up being 72 overall, 93 throw power, 76 deep, 80 medium accuracy, 83 short. These ratings are like really comparable to what Keon Carter is right now. And he had A awareness that ends up being 74. So he's actually pretty good starting out. And I looked at his QB style, and his release is Slinger 4. I'm not even sure what Keon Carter's is, but it actually might be Slinger 4 too. I'm not exactly sure on that. But a pretty good developmental quarterback. So we now have 3 quarterbacks on the roster, and each of them are in a different type of role. Later in the draft, in the 4th round, we draft Maurice Finch, and he ends up being a 66 overall right tackle and a 67 overall left guard after we change his position. Very good run blocker, questionable pass blocker, but I hope that he can get some XP in practice and through scenarios and things like that, and hopefully he will develop there. And then finally, our last pick ends up being Devon Bridge, a massive human being, 6'5", over 300 pounds. He's a 65 overall right end, but then after moving him inside, which I'm going to pretty much develop him as a defensive tackle, he ends up being 67 overall. So he's not a bad D tackle, and I've had success with lower overall defensive tackles being pretty productive. So I'm very happy with that selection. So the number 1 overall pick was Jameel Harris, and he ends up being really good. 78 overall, hidden dev, 84 finesse moves. He looks like one of the better defensive ends you can probably get in one of these draft classes. Chris Swede went number 2 overall, and he tremendously drops off from Harris, 73 overall. But how about this? Number 3 overall is Keegan Adams, a true 63 overall. Incredible. 83 throw power. Wow, did the 49ers make a mistake here? This guy is terrible. He might be the number 3 overall pick and not even play. This might be Trey Lance part 2. It's literally Trey Lance part 2. They did the same thing, drafted Lance number 3 overall. I think it was worse for Lance because they traded, 2 first rounders for him, and they ended up not even paying him or playing him, but that's a bad pick. Maybe one of the worst I've seen in Madden this series. Stephon Billingsley was a offensive tackle we highlighted earlier. Ends up being 72 overall, but only normal dev. Josh Burst, 75 overall defensive end, goes to the Pittsburgh Steelers at number 5. And then Keenan Davis ends up being a 79 overall. I think there was a risk in going after him, but it ends up paying off here for the Panthers. And do I regret it? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, we drafted Danny Rudd, who's pretty good, but Davis ends up being really good as well. Like nothing's under 80. And then Trent Ingram goes a couple of picks later, and I am shocked by this. I didn't expect these ratings. I thought he was going to be probably 75, 74 overall. Ends up being the same rating as Keenan Davis. So these two are very, very comparable, and they go 1 and 2 as receivers. Bryce Meeks goes to the Giants at pick number 12, I believe that was, and he ends up being really good. He is the top-rated safety in the draft, and he is one of the top-rated players overall in the draft. But take a look at this. The number 1 rated player in this draft was Michael Raymond going to the Jets at 79 overall, drafted in the 3rd round. Wow. Remember, Greg McPherson was Rookie of the Year. but he has a 99 overall deep accuracy rating. Did not see that coming. I did not even scout him, so I've had no chance of even knowing that. Let's check out our division. D'Angelo Edwards is the top pick from the Chiefs, a pretty decent right guard, but nothing, to bang your head over. Paul Neal ends up being a true 72 overall guard, but 75 with morale. And then the Broncos actually select a pretty decent left end at 75 overall with pick number 10 in the draft. So the Broncos select a really good piece for them, and we'll see how good he ends up being when we face him. But overall, I'm very, very happy with this draft and free agency. I think we've added the pieces, and we are now a true 84 overall team across the board. I really liked what we did in the free agency. Let me know what you guys thought. What do you guys give us as a draft grade? If I had to grade all of these drafts from season 1, 2, and 3, I guess in retrospect, we know how good some of those players were. But season 2's draft was really good. We had a very good draft. Season 1's draft was good. So I'd say season 1 and season 3, they're pretty equal. But Casey Burton was our top pick in season 1. He ends up being, pretty much an all-pro, led the league in interceptions this year. Hopefully one of these rookies can stand out just like that. So hit subscribe, hit that like button. Next episode, we will highlight some preseason stuff and get straight into the regular season. I'm excited for that. And then we will look at the undrafted free agent class because I'm excited to look at the receivers. I thought this was a weak receiver draft class, but that always means you can pick up some undrafted ones in free agency. So hit subscribe, hit that like button. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Stay tuned. Let's get it. Let's go.
I like getting money, I got time to get it. Target on me, so my car's a tinted. Dancing with the devil, I don't bargain with it. Bobbing in the dash, and the stick is with it. And I hit the 4-5 on the west side. But I'm from the east side, this how we slide. This how we ride, yeah, this how we ride.